Hey man, I'm so sorry. I didn't see the email until a few minutes after when you'd messaged.
No problem.
And I'll be honest, I in my head I was thinking, oh, you're gonna call regular like a regular phone call. So I think I just got confused. Sorry about that,
No problem. No.
dude. I've not seen you since. Woo.
It
It
was
might have been.
no, it was it was Saturday night, Sunday Night Live. Uh,
Yeah,
the Costa Coffee on Oxford Road in
that's
Manchester.
yeah. I bumped into you then.
How long ago was that?
Wow. No, that's testing me now, but it feels like. And then before that, it must have been back at
Yeah,
either one of your church events. We
yeah,
used to do loads of you and your brother. Is your brother still kind of doing? He managed Shayo at one point, didn't he?
yeah,
Shayo
yeah,
Mighty.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think he was the connection.
He's still doing a lot of stuff in business. Is
Okay.
just yeah, watch out for him. There's a lot of stuff coming soon, so you'll be seeing his name everywhere. But
Oh,
anyway,
nice. Is he okay? Launching a new product of some kind.
lots of honestly, that guy is just lots of different things. The
Okay.
I
All
think
right. Yeah. Cool.
I think his issue is which one of these many things that I've got at my fingertips am I doing first? You know.
Fair enough.
So yeah, man. Long time no see. I
I
decided
know.
I decided to join you in bed, gang, and
Yeah,
and
man. Oh man. Yeah, I started out with it just kind of being a mild thing, but I think the lockdown, man, I just couldn't be
yeah,
bothered keep shaping up and whatever. So it's just run real wild. It's like
yeah.
even my wife has just been like, bro, you need to do something about it. I just need to trim it. I mean, I think I'm gonna keep it a little bit longer than it has been. I think I'm
Yeah.
happy for the length, and my mustache has grown out a little bit more because I've always found it easier to grow the beard down here, but the hair up this side is a little bit
Okay.
thinner.
I
So I finally
I think I started shaving really early, so
okay.
I've always like been able to grow hair. Like you say, the more you shave, the more it grows. So like this is the longest
Yeah,
probably my beard has got because I've just left it. I'm now starting to use like beard oil and because
yeah,
there was a long time I wasn't interested in
yeah.
that kind of stuff, you know. So
I feel you. I feel you.
yeah,
So it's so good to see you looking, smiling, looking happy. Because when I got the
well,
news of what, your stroke, I was just like, okay. And I'll be honest, I never had a chance to told you this, but your experience was a massive part of what has prompted me,
okay,
yeah, to get my health in gear.
okay,
So so it's kind of crazy because I only found out about, well, when did we reconnected, and I noticed that you mentioned the stroke about what, a month, probably about a
but yes,
month and a half ago.
we're about 2 months away from it,
Yeah,
but yeah,
2 months.
yeah,
Yeah, exactly, 2 months. So it's only in the last month and sort of month, really a month and a half, that I've kind of had this epiphany of this is ridiculous. I am 300 and odd pounds. I am not as heavy as I've been in the past because I've lost weight, but I've regained and surpassed, really, really starting to rapidly head back to where I was at my heaviest. And I thought,
yeah,
this is crazy. I'm 35 and I feel like I'm 50. I have no fitness. I'm a couch potato. I eat garbage.
yeah.
That's not, and I'm a doctor. I should know better. It was just like my whole life was like a contradiction, and I was like,
Okay,
something,
yeah,
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 something
yeah,
isn't right here. And I was going through. I'll be honest. I mean, I've shared fairly openly about some of my stuff, my challenges, but I've had really crippling like anxiety and
yeah,
quite low mood as well at times. And the lockdown didn't help, but I'm thankfully in so much of a better place on
yeah,
all across the board. Just through engaging in therapy, engaging in I'm on medication as well,
yeah,
which is just really helping. Spiritually, just getting more plugged in and finding that that's also just kind of helping to ground me. And then physically, I built up from doing no exercise. I mean, I know some people say, "Oh yeah, really no exercise." I was a member of a gym, and literally I would probably go like once in every 6 months. It was
yeah.
terrible,
Okay,
and I would just drive everywhere. I would walk the minimal up and down on the steps, never go on walks. If I could avoid walking, that's how bad. And now I'm doing, averaging on sort of like 90 minutes of exercise a day,
Okay.
managing 15 to 20,000 steps a day for
Yeah,
the
yeah,
last couple of weeks. And before that, I built up slowly. So I didn't just get straight there,
yeah.
but
Okay.
but yeah, just pleased with the progress. I've also got a life coach, which has really surprisingly helped me, because I was kind of like not skeptical, but I never really saw or imagined the need for one for me personally. I've seen them, be used even in the primary care setting. People have kind of recommended, kind of coaches for lifestyle. So I've seen there's evidence for it, and people have benefited, but I've just never really thought it was something that I'd need. And it's probably singularly what's helped me the most, I think, in terms of just addressing some of the deeper issues and insecurities, I think, that manifested in the kind of decisions I was making regarding my
Yeah.
body. So
Bro,
yeah, man, it's
there's so much you said. Let's let's.
yeah. I mean, I'm so sorry, because I honestly, I'm so excited, like on the edge of my seat to hear some of what you're going through. So I thought, I just really, really blitzed that, but like, absolutely, if you wanna,
Break it down.
I'm not in a rush. So
Yeah.
we can.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean,
All right. So wow. Okay.
for
All
me,
right. Where do you prefer me start?
um, let's start by. We can do proper introductions. Obviously, this is going to go out, and then we can talk about.
Mm-hmm.
We can just do it. We can probably interview each other. Question after question, and then we'll just see where we go. So, hello everybody. I'm Aya. So where am I now? I am a consultant, acute medicine, working in Whiston, and I had a stroke on the 5th of June. As a consequence of that, I started taking my health seriously.
Yeah.
I think that's the best introduction I can give. By yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Joel Brown. Thanks for inviting me to come and have a chat with you, Ayo. So my background, I'm in primary care and general practice, and really, for me, my sort of health epiphany was recognizing at 35, I felt like as if I was living in a 50-year-old's body, completely unfit, morbidly obese. My weight at the point of realization on the 28th of July was 146 kilograms. So I was actually having a conversation like with my daughter, and she looked at me around that time. She says, Joel, Daddy, sorry, you eat so many biscuits. Like, why is that? And I kind of had this like crazy thought of what the heck am I doing with my life? So kind of like, yes, I just wanted to talk to you about that.
Yeah. So right. So why medicine? Because for me, like, I've been thinking about it, right? I
Yeah.
thought I wanted to be a doctor since I was about 12.
Mm-hmm.
And, there were people in my family that were unwell. And I thought that was because of the interaction with the hospital or whatever, that I thought, maybe that's something I want to do. But I met a friend from primary school, and they were like, no, you wanted to be a doctor since primary school. And that's something I didn't remember. That I've since, 5, 6, 7, 8, I was clear about this is the path that I wanted. And to the point that, like, when people ask me, I don't know why. I can't answer because I've always known it's what I wanted to do. I couldn't tell you the thing that, started me in that direction. So what was it for you?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So I don't think mine was as early as the ages you mentioned, but I think that I had an aunt, my aunt, well, she's still alive, and she trained in London back in the sort of 60s, and she's a consultant rheumatologist based over in Canada that's now retired. But I knew that she was a medical doctor, but to be honest, didn't have much influence from her directly, other than knowing that's my aunt, and at least knowing it was a possibility. And I kind of heard a few things about some of her career early on, and I thought, oh, that sounds interesting. And then I think for me, it wasn't until my whole family emigrated to the UK. Just before then, I really started to think about aptitude. I was pretty good at, biology, chemistry, the sciences, on a whole, and found myself kind of inclined towards. I just found myself interested in the career of medicine because I think it sort of combined my sort of academic interest in the science with a genuine interest in seeing people become better.
Yeah.
There were times when I observed the work of doctors either portrayed on television as well, which I think did have some degree of appeal for me. But I think for me, once I got to the UK, had a chance to do some work experience in a general practice setting in Wakefield. I think it was a surgery there, and I was sold. I just immediately thought I want to do this. And
How old
so
were you at
yeah,
the time?
well, at that time, so I did my first sort of, experience in a general practice setting. I was 16, 17, that sort of age, kind of during my A levels, because I was just about to, start to figure out, as you know, when you're doing your AS levels, you're starting to think about where you want to apply to university. And I think that doing that work experience just sealed the deal for me, really. So
Okay.
it's over the couple of years leading up to that, I started to think about it, and then I think that was the point of decision for me.
So you'd already chosen A levels that happened to help you get to medicine before you made a decision for medicine.
So that's an interesting one. So technically, I mean, I always knew I wanted to do math as an A level, so I did. I liked biology and I didn't like chemistry that much, but I decided I would do it. I thought I was okay at it, but I would do it. And it was interesting. I nearly decided to abandon chemistry and do something else.
Yeah.
And then I discovered that actually, medicine would require chemistry was one of the compulsory grades at the time I was applying. So I hooked, hanged on to it. But I think for me, it was in the back of my mind at the choosing of my A levels, but it wasn't the only option at the time when I chose. In fact, there were a few days where I thought I liked math more than any other subject.
Right,
so
okay.
whether that would have ended up me going to go off to university to do math or become a math teacher, I'm not sure, but it certainly was a strong pull for me.
So, because the thing is, obviously, for me, because of the focus, like I chose chemistry, biology, and physics. At the time I chose them, I assumed I would need biology. I didn't realize I needed chemistry, but I chose them. I actually did maths for like a month, and I was like, nope.
Yeah.
That's not for me. I dropped it. But again, all of this was because of the fact that I had decided where I wanted to go. So it wasn't even necessarily that I liked these topics, but these were the topics I had chosen because this is what I thought would help me get into medical school,
Yeah.
Because I always find it interesting when I have conversations with people and they're like, I just chose X, Y, and Z at A level because I liked it.
Yeah.
And to see where their trajectory of life was given, because I think there was so much of my identity that was medicine that I didn't have a lot. Some people I've spoken to some people and they're like, oh, this kind of self-discovery thing in teens or early, like, well, I didn't have any of that. I was very focused, medicine. Okay, so how many times did you apply?
Well, for me, I was kind of one of those ones that I got in the first application. I applied, right at the beginning of, during my A levels, got the conditional offers and then got the grades and got in. I took a year out before starting though. So I had what they call a deferred entry. So it was an acceptance that was deferred to the following year.
Yeah. So that's interesting because I think I applied 3 times. I mean, my route to medicine is a whole hour on its own. But suffice to say, I applied 3 times. I only ever had 1 interview.
Wow.
So I got rejected all the other times. And the place I got was for that 1 interview. And I actually, through Providence and God's working, that I found out on the day. So again,
Wow.
that is a long story. One day, one.
Sounds like a testimony,
It is.
man.
It is.
Yeah, and just yeah, I just want to say though that I appreciate that my story of getting in the first time is uncommon, and particularly I've spoken to a few people who've had a challenging road in, or maybe had didn't get in the first or second time. And so I think that however you get in, it doesn't matter. Ultimately,
Absolutely.
obviously getting in is the
Yeah.
key thing, but at the same time to acknowledge that it's not always an easy road.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I think like I've always been like, I rate people who were able to get in first time, because I wasn't. I don't say it as being disparaging to myself. It just is what it is. I didn't get in first time or second time. So anybody who did, hats off to you. And I think so.
Yeah.
Another question I had is, what was your application like from the point of view of being a Black man?
Yeah.
And your experience of being Black in medical school?
Yeah. So interestingly, wow. So okay, I'll give you a little bit of a quick bit of background. So one of the things I was very aware of applying to medical school was even from when I was doing my A levels, that there was a sort of there was a sense that I was maybe reaching above my station among some of my teachers. That
Okay.
was actually kind of mentioned in passing, and the kind of comments that I got when I told people that's what I wanted to do around, somebody. So that was kind of interesting. And of course, coming from Jamaica, I kind of didn't really know what to expect. I was fairly young when I came. I was still just 16 and still kind of figuring out the world, and a bit of culture shock. So that was something I thought, okay, so that's interesting. So why is it that in my mind, it's something that I absolutely think I am capable of doing. I have the intelligence, I have the capacity to do it. I've got an aunt who is a doctor. The doctors that treated me in Jamaica were all looked like me. So I didn't see this as an issue. So I think that was when I started to realize that I'm now living in a world where some people might think that some careers are maybe a little bit, outside the reach of people that look like me. So I think that started to affect me a little bit in terms of just thinking, okay, so what do I need to do to ensure that I market myself or present myself well? So I remember in the months leading up, bearing in mind I came with a fairly strong Jamaican accent, so I remember thinking, well, I've got to try to refine and polish the way that I spoke to make sure that I came across intelligently in the interview and that sort of thing. So it was
You were aware of
interesting.
that from the get-go?
I was aware of that perhaps I needed to make sure I presented myself in a way that gave me the best shot of proving that I was worthwhile. Yeah.
Okay.
Even from the beginning. Thankfully, credit to the school. I felt, I felt the interview went really well. I felt really respected by my interviewers. I felt like they listened and acknowledged and responded to what I said in a very welcoming way. It felt like a very pleasant interview, and I thankfully got an offer from, obviously got an offer from the place I eventually went to.
What was your first question? What did they ask you first?
Oh, yeah, I would honestly be guessing. Unfortunately, I've literally not thought about that for so long now.
Really?
I'm just trying to see if I could just pull it out of the recesses of my mind. They might have asked me about why I wanted to be a doctor. That somehow either was first or somewhere in the it came in there. I can't. That's the one that I kind of almost remember was near first.
Fair enough. Okay, so I mean, we're here to talk. Let me tell you the story. So I wanted to be a doctor for a long time. I remember in high school telling my science teacher I wanted to be a doctor, and her laughing.
Yeah.
So okay. And again, I thank God that I've always been pretty resilient. So I'm aware of the fact that, like you say, evidently, this is out of reach for me. No problem.
Yeah.
I'm aware of that, but I've determined that this is where I'm aiming for. So again, A level were chosen to get to medicine. I applied, and again, so I mean, because of church and family and stuff, I was conscious of the fact that I wanted to stay in Manchester. you know, so I wanted to go to Manchester Medical School. And Manchester Medical School is a good medical school, but I wanted to stay in Manchester to be around and help with family and church and stuff. So I remember the year that I applied, I was so confident, like, because at the time UCAS had 6 places, and when you were applying for medicine, because medicine was oversubscribed, they said you were only allowed to apply for 5. You had to leave one blank or not medicine, and I was going to leave it blank. I was like, I'm getting in. There's no question about it. I've done. And then my dad was like, no, maybe you should just, you know, apply for bio. So I applied for the closest thing to medicine, biomedical science. So biomedical and biomedical science. And, you know, my first year at A-level, I didn't do that well. Okay. I dropped maths because it was too hard. And I think there were some physics and chemistry exams that I was getting like D's and E's. So again, I'm aware of my aspiration, but I know where I am. So second year A-level, I was like, again, I'm aware that a lot of medical schools don't like people who have done 3 years of A-levels. So it's getting the grades, but also getting them in the 2 years. So I really worked hard. And again, my dad really encouraged me. He set me on the path of doing past papers, because, you know, you get to the point from your exam technique that there's only a certain amount of questions they can ask. And if you can expose yourself to enough, then you start to recognize the patterns, the questions, and halfway down the paper, you know what the answer is because you've seen this question before. So I did quite well in my first half of second year A-level, but obviously I had to catch up. So in the end, I got 3 Bs. Okay. At A-level. Now, I am aware that there are people who got into medical school in my year with 3 Bs or less than 3 Bs, but I didn't get into any medical school. So that was disappointing. But I did biomedical science, and I remember the first day, the dean came and he's like, "Oh, you don't look very happy." We're like, "Well, I don't want to be here. I want to be doing medicine. That's my path." And I did biomedical sciences, and again, for me, it was a placeholder. It was, I'm doing this to get to medicine. I mean, you'd hear stories about some people who did so well in the first year of biomedical science that somebody would whisper in their ear if they wanted to do medicine, that they would like move them if they got a first or whatever. So I didn't get first in my first year, so that wasn't out for me. I got to the end of my biomedical science and I got a 2. So I'm aiming for a 2-1 because 2-1 gives me the best chance to apply for medicine because that's where I want to go. I got a 2-2. And again, it was like, you know. I think I applied. Yeah, so I applied at the end of my what's the names? Degree, got 2-2. I was disappointed, but I remember my mum saying to me, like, so obviously the Bible reminds us to give thanks in all situations, not for all situations. And to be spending lots of time being down and in the dumps is to not be thankful to God, because that's be intentional about what we can be thankful for. So, okay, let's thank God. I made it through. I'm alive. I'm healthy, fine. Okay. So I went to speak to the admissions tutor, and no, in fact, I tried to get to speak to the admissions tutor, but all that summer she was dodging me. She wouldn't answer, and it got to. I went to speak to her, and she said, "So there's 2 parts to your medical applications. There's the academic part and the non-academic part. There's nothing you can do about the academic part because that's the degree that you've been assigned. You just have to do something to show us that you want to do medicine." At the time, I'd applied to be a HCA. So I remember her saying, "That's the best thing you can do." And I know that sometimes people can want things so much that you hear something that somebody's not saying, but like, I'm not that guy. So I would mortgage my house on that memory. That is exactly what she said to me. I'm confident about that. So I did the HCA thing for a year. And then, because again, there's nothing I can do about my degree, but now I've got a year's worth of experience in healthcare under my belt. And what I was advised is that this is, you know, something that's going to help me get to medicine. So I applied. So no, I tried to get, I think I applied 4 times. So I applied again and I got rejected again. I'm not interested in the other rejections because my aim is Manchester. So I tried to get hold of the admissions tutor, by which time it was a different lady. All summer I was chasing, and it got to the beginning of September, and she agreed to meet me, and I walked into her office, and the first thing she said to me is, I don't know what to tell you. You have to raise your degree. So this is the complete opposite of what I was told a year ago. So I said that I'm confused, because the lady that was in your position last year told me there's nothing I could do about my degree. She's like, no, you need to raise your degree. You need to get a master's. So, and so check this out. The lady that I'd met initially, not only had she not put in my records that she'd met me, she hadn't written anything down about the advice that she'd given. So from a medical school application point of view, it just looked like I'm just off my own back, spent a year doing a HCA, and it actually didn't benefit me at all in terms of the route to medicine. So, I mean, it took me a while to forgive her. But so now we're in, and then I remember my brother was taking me on a holiday to Bude, like in Cornwall, for a week, and I came back, and because I asked the lady which degree, she said any degree, and I was like, which masters? Any masters? I didn't believe her, because it doesn't make sense that with a 2-2 in biomedical science, I could do a master's in, I don't know, whatever, and then apply to medicine. So I found a master's degree. I was looking for master's degrees. By this time, term was already started. So I have my BSc 2-2 biomedical science, and I actually did a master's in bioinformatics. And it sounds fancy, but in reality, these were the only people that would let me on 2 weeks into the course.
Right.
So bioinformatics, I didn't like it. I didn't like it. It was a slog, because it was essentially looking at biometric systems and things like that. And I have an understanding about it, but I'm not. A lot of the people came from an IT background, not a biology background. A lot of people had applied early. They'd got grants. Like some of them, they had somebody pay for the course and also give them a bursary. Like, and I had to pay for myself. So I really didn't enjoy it. But again, the aim is to do this to get to medicine. And I did my dissertation, and my project was, my final year project was essentially a biometric hand scanner. So like being able to recognize somebody and give them access to somewhere by the hand. So I designed it and did the coding and stuff like that. So again, I couldn't reproduce it. There's no way I could do it now. But and my brother, who works for an investment bank and he does software engineering, helped me out. Now the interesting thing is that the masters that I did was in the same building that the medical school is in, Stopford building. And I remember at the time that I was reminded of what God said to Abraham, that wherever your foot goes, I'm going to give it to you. Now, prior to that, I'd never actually stepped in the building for anything medical. It really came to me in my heart that actually what I'm doing is I'm claiming where I'm stepping. So, fine. So I did the master's, and I applied, and I got rejected from everywhere but Manchester.
Manchester.
So I had a £30 tie that I bought for a friend's wedding. I went to the interview. The first question they asked me was, okay, so you're a DJ for Carnival FM. And honestly, I was like, what is this guy talking? I was blown like Matrix. I took about 2 minutes to like what I expected the first question to be, why medicine or why doctor? But because Manchester Carnival, the church, we'd got involved and done a gospel show. I put that in my statement, and so I recovered from that. The interview, I think, went well. They were laughing at my jokes and stuff. And again, so the name of God, Jehovah Jireh, obviously means a lot to a lot of people. God who provides, but for me, I've heard people say that it means more than that. It's the God who sees ahead to provide. So one of the ladies who was in charge of the admin of the course that I did, the biomedical sciences, she was friends with the new admissions tutor.
Yeah.
So in life, you learn it's as much who you know as what you know. Who knows what conversations would have happened behind closed doors and stuff. And I think it's a reminder about trying to be a testimony wherever you are, because you don't know, or be nice to people wherever you are. You don't know what people are going to do. I never asked her for anything, but I knew they were friends. I only knew that they were friends when the new admission tutor said, "Oh, so you know Mary?" I was like, "Yes, yes, I do." So I had an interview, and I remember I thought it went well. I was waiting to hear. I was expecting to hear a couple of weeks later. I was having lunch with a friend, and I got a call literally half an hour after the interview to say, "Relax, you're in."
Yeah, come on. Half an hour, man. God is all over that, bro.
Yeah, so
I really appreciate hearing this story. Like, I've just not known your blow by blow. We had conversations about the little elements of it I can sort of vaguely piece back together, but now hearing the whole story in retrospect, it's been good.
So, like, for me, getting into medicine is something I really appreciated, because for me, it was God all over. I was so grateful to have my prayers answered. And I think the fact that it was delayed a little helped me appreciate it more. So I was mature because I was older, but it really helped me appreciate that this is where I've strived so hard to get to. I'm not going to be frivolous about studying and stuff. I'm going to take it seriously. I'm going to do the best. Even today, I have to catch myself and remind myself, and it's like, this is the thing that you think of, all the work you did in the trenches to get here. Yeah. So let's enjoy here. It's not a perfect job, but thank God that he was able to help me get here. But yeah, for me that's a big testimony. And interestingly, the first 6 months of medicine overlapped with the last 6 months of the masters, so it was it was pretty tough. It was pretty tough. Awesome. Resilience.
Yeah, man. Wow. No, I appreciate that. Were there any other questions that you wanted to share about? Because I'm kind of definitely intrigued to hear about a little bit about what's obviously sort of happened in the last couple of months. I don't know if you wanted me to segue there, or was there anything else you wanted to cover?
No, I mean, I think I'm happy to do the whole journey. We can chop and change, because we can always edit it and stuff like that. So so medical. Okay. How many Black people
Mm-hmm.
were there in your medical school? In
Oh,
your
wow.
year and in total?
So when I started, I remember, because I'm gonna have to think about this. I remember, I think I was the only fully black male. There was a gentleman who was dual heritage. I remember his name is Brett. I can't remember his surname, but he was just, oh, maybe I have to edit that out. But yeah, so there was what we call a dual heritage person, black and white. And then there was, I remember there was a black girl, I believe. I think actually she might have been dual heritage as well. So that's what I remember. It was the first year. Second year, I think that we had a couple of black students that joined in from, because we have a program with a neighboring university that, if you, they call it clinical sciences, it's in Bradford. So if you do well in their first year, you can then move to the second year with the second year students. So we had a couple streaming in that way. And then the year beneath me, they had a few more black students. I just remember thinking, oh, there's just a few more in this year group. But in my year group, my starting year group, I am pretty certain, scanning the halls, I'm just thinking about it. I remember being the only black guy in my first year group. There may have been another, but if my memory serves me correctly, I think I was the only black guy in my year group.
How many people were in your year?
About between 180 and I think it was about that. But,
Okay.
yeah. And I mean, if anyone ever proves me wrong by looking at the data, I'm willing to concede. I'm literally doing this, whatever, 16, 17 years. But yeah.
I think for me at Manchester Medical School, our year, there was about 300 people.
Okay.
In terms of black guys, like I can remember me and Johnny, me and another guy. I think in total, counting black and mixed race people, there's probably, I don't know, less than, I think 15 to 20.
Okay.
And like, did you have any thoughts about that? How did that make you feel? Or like,
Well, at the time, I'll be honest, at the time I assumed it was just that maybe not that many black students aspired to do medicine, and the only reason being, when I came, and I as I said, came big and really confident from Jamaica and thought this was just something that it was so obvious for me to do. When I also told some of my black friends who were born in the UK, some of them responded like, really, like almost like, why are you going for that? Like they almost sort of thought that was just a bit over ambitious or whatever as well. So I found that interesting, that maybe I thought that, okay, black students probably are interested in other careers. And it wasn't until I started to go through the process of having more conversations, especially with people who tried to get in and couldn't, and started to realize, okay, so there could be a lot more to this. The reason. But I was thinking at the time in first year, I didn't have the consciousness to consider whether or not there were any structural issues or difficulties for people from different groups to be able to be represented in the cohort. So I've kind of grown in that.
And I think for me, I started off like, oh, well, maybe people didn't apply, but then I was like, you mean to tell me that in the country, me and this other guy, the only black guys who fit the eligibility criteria, like really? So I became very cynical very early from that point of view. And been like, well, my take home was evidently, I don't know what the issue is, but there's an issue with the selection process. I do not believe that of all the people that, so first off, I agree with you that, from a society point of view, I mean, representation is an issue. You often don't aspire to be the things you don't see. And if are young black boys or young black girls encouraged to say, actually, medicine's an option for you, you know?
Yeah.
So where young black boys and girls live, you know, potentially
Mm-hmm.
in low socioeconomic situations, is the teacher in that school doing anything other than laughing when the student
Mm-hmm.
says, I want to be a doctor? Is the
And I
teacher...
never told, yeah.
Go on, go on, go on.
No, I was gonna just say, when you gave me that example, I nearly leaped out of my seat. The example of how the teacher responded to you, because I didn't tell you. I kind of glossed over that bit. So when I first came from Jamaica, I told my chemistry teacher that I wanted to be a doctor with the kind of bravado that only a Jamaican could. And he looked at me with the most serious face. I knew that he was not joking.
Yeah.
And said, if you became a doctor, I would never let you come near me with a barge pole. That's what he said to me.
Wow.
I wish it was just a laugh. I know at the time, but here in my naivety, I just put it down to, I guess he probably thought maybe I'm not the kind of doctor that I didn't even think it was racial. I'd just be honest with you. He's a white teacher. But in retrospect, you telling a 16-year-old child who's expressed to you as their teacher their ambition, whatever that may be, that is not the time to respond with the kind of, even if you thought that it was funny, which it didn't. I admit he had a serious face, and he said it with a kind of apparent kind of conviction.
Yeah.
But whatever your motivation might be, you don't shoot down a person's dreams with that kind of response and make them feel that they're somehow unsuitable. Now, I now in retrospect think that the combination of whether he felt that I would just not be a safe doctor or whatever, I do believe that there was some kind of racialized kind of interpretation there. But even if that wasn't the case, it was highly inappropriate. No teacher should ever have the opportunity or ever think it reasonable to say that to a child when they express, their interest, their ambitions or aspirations. And I think that too, I wouldn't be surprised, given that we're on this call, neither of us have shared that story with each other, but we both have an experience where a teacher responded in some kind of disparaging way to us expressing an interest in medicine. I think that's something that needs to be looked at. How many black boys and girls are being either directly or indirectly given a kind of discouraged, at that point.
I'm struck by the oxymoron of what he said. So if you qualified as a doctor, so there is a point above which society says you can be a doctor. It's not a matter of will, or I think I can do it. Actually, you've passed the exams. You've objectively scaled all the hurdles. If you cross that, I'm not going to let you treat me. It's a nonsense. You're either a doctor or you're not a doctor, but I agree with you. So I mean, for me, like I said, I was cynical. I was like, well, evidently there is an issue with the selection process. I mean, now I have the vocabulary to be able to talk about things like systemic racism and prejudice and human factors and all these kinds of stuff. But I didn't have it. I didn't have that then. I wasn't aware. I just knew something was wrong. I would look around, and again, but yeah. So, what about patience?
Yeah. So I will say this: my experience in medical school, generally speaking, like my tutors, I think, were supportive. I had one professor in the very beginning who was a bit sort of unreasonable, because I was getting trains in from a nearby city. I didn't actually live in the city where I did went to medical school. So I kind of had to be getting early trains, and sometimes trains would be late. I remember the first professor one day came in late, and he just refused to let me into the lecture, and I was like 6 minutes late. His cutoff was 5. And I'd gotten a taxi from the train station just to make sure I could try and get there. And so I think it was just, he principally did not let people in past the time. He was like that for anyone.
Okay.
But so other than just having, you know, just that sort of thing to deal with a few personality clashes, I you know, got through medical school, you know, without any feeling like I was a kind of racially disadvantaged in any way. Patience wise,
Sorry to go back to that. There were no trainers, no communications tutors, no, everybody was.
well, that's what I mean. Like, I mean, I had health challenges in medical school that, and I did have exam, you know, I did deal with exam failures as, you know, in my process, but I never ever felt from me personally, that I felt disadvantaged or deliberately kind of you know, sort of treated in a way disproportionately negatively because I was black. At least I should say I didn't perceive that that effect for me throughout the process of medical school. So, you know, I will give credit, because I'm the kind of person that, you know, will admit that. Now, post qualification, now that's another question. That's another situation entirely.
Yeah.
But I will say, patient wise, interestingly, I practice. I'll just speak more generically. So I practice in West Yorkshire. So we kind of have quite a diverse, you know, expression of patients. You know, I see patients of different kind of ethnicities. And for me, in terms of racism, the only times I've definitely experienced patients who have been delirious, or sort for the non-medical people. So, you know, perhaps a little bit confused, maybe that's a better word. So confused due to a medical cause, and they've responded in ways, you know, unpredictably, sometimes made offhand comments, talked about the colored doctor, that sort of thing. And I tend to have a bit more grace for that, because I think if you're drunk, I see that slightly differently. But I think if you're genuinely confused, then, you know, I don't see the intentionality the same. So I have had offhand remarks. I've had nasty words said by patients who were very confused. But other than that, I've not personally had a patient who was fully, you know, not in the confused state, say, I'm not going to see a black doctor. Thankfully, I've not had that experience, though I know colleagues personally in some of the same hospitals I worked who had that experience.
Yeah. I mean, so medical school, I remember distinctly one situation in a communications class. So I always thought I was pretty good at communications. And so I am also aware of the fact that my name is Ayo. It's not Dave.
Joel.
or Mike or whatever. Fine. So there was a communications tutor, and we were going around talking, and she's like, oh, everyone say your name and something about you. So I said, okay, my name is Ayo, blah, blah. She said, oh, Ayo, that's really interesting. And I was like, okay, I spy you, so whatever, I'll just keep an eye on this. Because obviously in Nigerian culture, Ayo isn't a particularly unique name. It's only in the context of where you come from. No problem. So we did a role play, and, you know, she said to me, you know, although you have an accent, I want you to know that I understood everything that you said. So I'm thinking, who's got an accent? Like, what are you talking about? And I remember speaking to my friends about it, and everybody was laughing because, you know, my name is Ayo, but there's nothing, when you meet me, you don't know that I wasn't born in this country.
Yeah.
Everything I sound like I was born here. So my friend was like, you should have said, what accent? And like made it really uncomfortable. But for me, I was like, right, yeah, okay. I kind of just let it slide. Because I kind of knew something like that was coming from the way she was so interested in my name. There wasn't really that much I was aware of in medical school with patients. It's interesting. Like I get a lot like, oh, where are you from?
Right.
So, and depending on the mood I'm in, the answer could change, because I suspect I know where the answer is coming from. So Manchester. No. Where are you from?
Yeah.
Manchester.
Yeah.
No. No. Where you from? Like, so again, sometimes I'll be like, oh, Nigeria. Yeah, like it confirmed
Yeah.
everything that is. So, because again, when you meet me and you listen to listen to my accent,
Mm-hmm.
there's I know that I was born in Nigeria. And I'm not trying to, disregard my heritage at all. But what I'm saying is that you meeting me, you don't know that. So
Yeah.
it's the premise of you see me and what I look like, and
Yeah.
must investigate where I'm from because you suspect that because of how I look, I don't come from here. As if Black people can't be born in the in the UK. Because again, I've spoken to a few friends, and my white colleagues don't often get that question, where you from? So I'm pretty convinced about what the motivation is. I've had a few, interestingly though, there are some people who I've been wrong about, and they've been like, "Oh yeah, you look Nigerian. I used to work there for 30 years," and stuff like that, you know. But I've had a few. I've been mistaken for a taxi driver a few times. Again, this is with stethoscope.
Yeah.
On my shoulders and stuff.
Yeah.
What else have I had? I've had this is pre-corona. I've had people go to. I always introduce myself. Hi, my name is Aya. I'm one of the doctors, and I try and establish rapport and shake hands. And I had one guy say, "Oh, not shake your hand. It's not because you're Black." Well, I didn't think it was, but now I do. Okay, fine. But again, these daily things. Everybody I know who's Black has a story like that.
Yeah, those I guess they call them microaggressions. Isn't that the general term to describe them? But I think that sometimes can be a misnomer, or at least they can be really frustrating. Like it depends on your mood on the day and the kind of cumulative effect. So I had a consultant who he's a South Asian gentleman, a senior consultant hematologist, and we were working in a district hospital. I was his SHO, and we were both standing at the door of the hematology ward. He's very obviously dressed in a striped shirt, clean pleated sort of charcoal gray trousers, and a stethoscope dangling around his neck. I've got a stethoscope. I've got my clipboard in my hand, and we're having a conversation at the beginning of the hall just before the door. A patient's relative comes in with a suitcase in her hand, who's assuming she's either coming to drop off the suitcase to the patient who's resident on the ward, and she kind of looks at him, not me. So I'm Black, he's Asian. She looks at him and gives him the suitcase and says, "Just take it to the ward." So he says, "Excuse me?" "Take it to the ward." And she just, like matter of fact, just commanding him to take it onto the ward. And then she soon realizes that she's obviously, the error of her ways, and she kind of said, "Oh, sorry, I thought you were the porter," or something like that. I mumbled that and it looked very blushed, and she looked genuinely embarrassed. But obviously for a consultant, to be right there in the most obvious apparel of a doctor, and we went into the side room and he vented. I watched a consultant 20 years my senior slam his hand on this is away from the patient now, so the person is gone, slam his hand on the cupboard and just said, "I've worked 30 years and this is the kind of treatment I get." And I've never seen him express any frustration at all in the 4 months prior that I worked with him. And I mean, at the time, of course I would recognize that was just so unreasonable for this person, even if they thought that they just made a genuine mistake. And you can kind of try to understand that it could have been unintentional, but what made her overlook such obvious cues that this was a doctor and just assume that the person was the hired help for the ward, to just bark a command at in the middle of our conversation. So, but that was enough to push him to an edge emotionally, to him, for him to express himself in a way to his junior. And he almost felt apologetic to me. Sorry, I just needed to let that out. And I said, don't worry, sir, I understand. And I think he knew when I said I understood because
Yeah.
that by that point I was qualified and I'd had my own experiences of
Yeah.
feeling unfairly treated.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I haven't had, like you say, anybody saying I'm not going to be treated by you.
No, I've not had that.
But again, it's one of those things I do wonder. Obviously, I've been black my whole life, so I don't have another point of, of reference. But I wonder, like, it's the fact that if a patient is funny with me, I have to. It's a legitimate thing for me to be concerned about. Is it because I'm black? You know, whereas maybe somebody else or some of our other colleagues may not have to wonder that. It's only okay.
That's it.
Fine. You didn't like what I said. You didn't like my diagnosis and stuff. But yeah, if a patient is funny with me, if a member of staff is funny with me, or it's a legitimate concern. Is this misunderstanding? Is this, how we missed each other? Is it because I'm black?
What I've often found, some of my black colleagues were able to find out about, or at least able to evaluate whether or not bad treatment or weird vibes that they got from a patient was due to some kind of racial prejudice, is often like if a white colleague came and saw the patient after and they felt comfortable enough to make an odd comment, it was actually sometimes the white colleague who was able to say no, that's not okay, and either feed that back and find some way to basically say that's not acceptable. So because oftentimes patients, particularly, I've found that we're not in America where people racists tend to sort of wear their feelings on their sleeves, and I'm sorry if that sounds really offensive to my American friends, but you often don't find that. I find that people are much more subtle and quite can be quite pleasant actually, even in their disdain for you. So and of course I really want to make it clear that I'm not here on a witch hunt. I've had as I said, really positive experiences, but I know people,
our experiences, like you say,
absolutely.
It's not as if we're making this up.
Oh gosh,
things happen, and they happen, regularly. All right. Okay. So where are you now? So are you, how long have you been GP?
So right. So my unique situation, I'm actually, because I've been part-time, so I'm in the final leg of my GP actual training. So and then I'll be finished with that basically in the next 6 months.
Okay. Cool. Cool. You're looking forward to the power.
Yeah, you know what? I think for me, one of the things that has become so clear, which I've kind of alluded to in some of what we spoke about initially, that as a doctor, the saying, physician heal thyself. For me, getting to the final destination, it's important that I take care of me holistically, because to survive an entire career in medicine, if you don't take care of yourself, number one, you're gonna end up retiring early or stopping because of illness and whatever. So it's one of those where I think I'm now for the first time in it feels like in the first time in at least a couple of years, where I feel super motivated, because I just feel like I'm taking so much better care of myself. And so I feel like I now, okay, right, so this is the end goal. Okay, this is what I need to do. And I feel like I'm doing it in such a holistic way that I'll be able to build a resilience going forward. I
remember when I finally did get into medical school, the dean said, I think on the first day or the second day, he was like, medicine, the course, has the highest dropout rate of any course. And doctors have the highest suicide rate of any profession. And just so, again, I think just what you're saying, it really strikes home. Like it's, so, I mean, I'm grateful, because I think being a doctor is something I'm gifted at. And I thank God for I thank God for that. It's not. It's the journey to get here and anywhere that's worth getting is uphill. But like I think that it's something I'm good at. However, I think you're right in that there's a degree to which we've got to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves. And for me, that was the beginning. That was why I posted. So a stroke. So I was on the ward.
Okay.
I was aware of not feeling 100%, and that's all it was when it started. I was on a ward round with 2 junior doctors, and I remember saying to them, "I don't feel so well," I thought, well, I've tried to do intermittent fasting recently, so I thought, maybe just my blood sugar is low. So I asked one of the nurses to check my blood sugar. I think it was 4.6 or something. So I'm like, fine, let me have a biscuit. Had a biscuit, didn't feel better. By this stage, again, I'm aware of like some pins and needles on my left side. So my arm and my torso and my leg. I'm carrying on with the ward round. Seeing the patient, coming back and sit down, getting up, sitting down. I remember I got up one time and I felt a bit woozy. Okay. So again, I just pushed through. But by the end of the ward round, I was limping. Just slightly. But again, in my mind, I'm not thinking I'm having a stroke. I'm just thinking, I'm limping. Again, it's interesting. I wasn't putting 2 and 2 together. I've had like migraines in the past, and obviously, you can get hemiplegic migraines where you get a migraine, stroke-like symptoms. So I was like, fine, it's a hemiplegic migraine, obviously. And I remember walking off the ward and thinking, no, go back. I went back and I asked one of the nurses to check my blood pressure. I don't know why, to check my OBS. And my blood pressure was high. I think at the time it was 162 over like 102 or something. Again, it's not, as an acute physician, like I'm not excited about that. And in my head, I'm always thinking about like, if a GP calls me about this guy, I'd be like, come on. So, and I was like, there was a sense in which there was, like, I had to make a decision because I was on a half day. Do I go home? And I was like, well, so I work in Merseyside and I live in Manchester. And I was like, no, like, I remember, like, it's strange because I remember thinking, if something really bad happens, I don't want my family to have to come here. But it's not as if I was thinking something bad was happening. You know what I mean? I was just thinking, like, it's too far for them to come if something happens. So let me just get home. And I was a bit apprehensive about the drive home, but I got home and I had something to eat, didn't feel better. I slept for a bit, didn't feel better. And again, I just started feeling worse and worse and really, really, really bad headache. And we have a blood pressure monitor at home. And by the time I checked it, my blood pressure was 200 and something over 120, 130. By this stage, I have exhausted every reason not to go and get checked out. By this stage, I'm properly limping. I have pins in. Do you know when you hit your funny bone? And but it's not just the pins and needles. It's like a pins and needles and a squeeze. I have that all over my left side, and I'm aware when I touch my face that it's like a second skin. But nothing. I say nothing else. That's pretty severe. But nothing like I hadn't. There wasn't anything. No slurred speech. No real like floppy limbs or anything like that. But I was limping. So we're in quarantine. So we called my mom. God bless her. She came and stayed with the kids, and my wife took me to the ER. And again with Corona, they didn't let her in. So I went in, and again, so I was like, who knows? I got seen by one of the emergency doctors. And interestingly, one of my friends from medical school was working alongside this doctor. So she came and said hi. Obviously, she didn't treat me, but she just came and said hi. That was nice. But by this time, the gentleman examined me and I had prodromal drift.
Wow.
Yeah. So,
Wow.
so he's like, so he was like, you've got to see medics. But I mean, I'm like it still could be a migraine, like,
Yeah.
you know. So I had a CT scan, and CT scan was fine, but I had symptoms. So they had to take me to the stroke tertiary center. So I think we got to A&E probably about 11. I left that hospital around 2. Got to the place at 2:30. Got seen by the stroke reg about 3-4. And again, she's like it could be a stroke, but it could also be a migraine. We'll just see. It was a disturbed night. I was really tired. And they took me to the hyperacute stroke unit. And in the hospital that they took me to, because I don't want to be too, I don't want to be too specific in case I get people in trouble. So I text my friends that work there, because I knew 2 people that worked there. So just so you know, I'm in the hyperacute stroke unit. If you want to come and say hi. The consultant saw me probably about 10, and it was interesting because I don't think I've ever been a patient before in the hospital, and she was asking me things like, okay, so if when I touch this side and when I touch that side, is it different? But so when you touch me on this side, I'm aware of the fact that there's second skin, so it doesn't feel like when you're touching me here, but you are also making the pins and needles sensation worse. So when she's asking me, is it better or is it worse? It's both.
Yeah.
And I had difficulty. Well, I was trying to articulate that to her. And then she was like, you know, I mean, by this stage, they were going to do an MRI anyway. She was like, well, you know, we'll get an MRI because you've got like subjective symptoms. And I was like, I know what that means. She may not have, you know, believed me or whatever. But by the time it got to about 5 o'clock, I was like, I've had a stroke. I've had a stroke. So I was really tired. And I know that I've been up all night. Well, not all night, but I've had a sleep, but it was more than that. And I remember being reminded of working on a stroke unit, and the consultant there was like, tiredness is one of the biggest symptoms of stroke. And obviously, after a stroke, you get refractory hypertension because your brain's trying to get the blood where it needs to go. All the pieces fit together. And I felt really sorry because it was a reg that had to come and tell me, and they know this time that I'm a consultant. You know, so I was like, I'm sorry, it had to be you. I apologized to her, but she was like, yeah, you know, he had a minor lacuna infarct. So for those of us not medical, that's a very small, thank God, clot in my right thalamus, which explains my left side symptoms. Now, by this stage, I had been able to walk. I mean, I was limping pretty heavily, but I was able to walk independently. And then so I was like, well, so can I go home then? Like, so, you know, my blood pressure was better. So the physio saw me, and then the occupational therapist saw me, and they were like, you know, maybe because of corona, but maybe because of the fact that thankfully my deficits weren't severe, I was able to be discharged that day. So Thursday night is when I went to A&E. Friday evening is when I left the tertiary center and got back home.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's interesting because like I've been joking to people like, you know, it's not as if my job is diagnosing acute illnesses. Hold on.
Yeah.
That is my job.
That is my job. Yeah, but it just shows you that when you're the patient, when you're having that experience, and you're no longer as, it might take a bit of time to put the pieces together because you're not really thinking about it in the kind of pattern recognition way that you would when you're seeing a patient objectively in front of you. So what I am fascinated to discover really, because I thought I should mention this. So because of my decision personally to take my health seriously and go on this path, I decided to launch a podcast to talk about health and well-being. And so I would love to be able to include, an element of our conversation in
Yeah,
that
yeah.
because of what I mentioned before. So I'll just start from this point. So Ayo, obviously I told you that when I reached out to you a couple months ago and I discovered this story about you having a stroke, and I'll be honest, I was sort of so taken aback. I'm like, Ayo is a few years older than me. We are both black men. We're both in the medical field. He, as from what I can see and looking at him, he looks fairly slim. He looks a fairly healthy, active guy. He's had a stroke. Me, on the other hand, I am 4 times his size. I'm morbidly obese. I've got, diabetes on both sides of the family. I'm literally a vascular time bomb. So, what I honestly, it shook me up.
Yeah.
And I don't want to get emotional, but I mean, I was really upset by the fact that you had that experience. So I just would love for you to just kind of share, like, what that, having gone through that, having had that kind of a just unpredictable experience, and just feeling the vulnerability, sitting in that place and just thinking, what on earth has happened to me? I'd just love for you to just share a little bit inside us how that affected you, how to going forward from that, what kind of experience, what kind of effect did it have on your outlook and on just your life?
Yeah, okay. So I mean, again, for most of the day, I wasn't like, oh, I'm having a stroke, oh no. Even when, because I'm pretty pragmatic about most things. So even when I came to when I was like, I've had a stroke, I was like, oh, okay, I've had a stroke. Not like, I've had a stroke, oh no, I've had a stroke. And I think that's how my mind works. Problem, solution. So I've had a stroke. What now? And I think, so a few things were going through my mind from a Christian point of view.
Yeah.
So I think I'm reminded that I've seen lots of conversations and stuff about the will of God and this. And, there are some people who are of the opinion that, we can pray, and as a consequence of that, nothing negative what I'm claiming in my Christianity is that no problems. And there are some people who are like, there's going to be problems and there's nothing that I can do about it. So there's no even point praying. And I think like any extremes, I'm in the middle. So I definitely believe that faith doesn't exempt one from issues. I think that's a bit of a Santa Claus-y notion. And I think at best it's false advertising. So, but I also believe that, the Bible is clear about the fact that we are created in the image of God. So God has given me the wherewithal to make change. I believe that. So I don't believe that there's nothing I can do and I just have to let life wash over me. I don't believe that.
That's good.
So I was struck with the intersection of health and healing. So, because growing up in a evangelistic, Pentecostal, charismatic home, like while a lot of my friends were watching movies, I was watching, videos about Benny Hinn and Reinhard Bonnke and stuff, and so that was my growing up. So I have grown up with the foundation of having no problem at all knowing that I can go to God and ask for a miracle. That's not a problem for me conceptually at all. But I think that I came to the conclusion that I think that we've not been good at talking about the whole message and the whole gospel. So, because if you look at the Garden of Eden, and when God created him, so God created it, like there's lots of stuff that's symbolic of, I think, abundant life. So God gave Adam a vocation, and later talks about her man doesn't work, he doesn't eat. God gave him some responsibility, but he also gave them, like the Bible says, that the trees were good for food and nourishment. Like, so there is there are things that and ways of living that
Mm-hmm.
God wants me to live to help me in divine health.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's God's best. So I heard a
Mm-hmm.
preacher talk about money. He was talking about like, I know that I can go to God and ask for money, but I don't want to live
Mm-hmm.
my life where I need to go to God to ask for money. I should know
Mm-hmm.
the principles about financial management and business and all that kind of stuff and living within my means. So I'm not always going to God because of the fact that I've overextended myself financially. Similarly, I think I came to the conclusion. I think that there's a lot of maybe people who believe in miracles and have very spiritual, that because of the fact that we believe that we can go to God for miracles, we're not taking responsibility for the things that we have to do to stay in health. So
Excellent.
because of God can heal me, I don't have to do regular exercise. I don't have to watch my diet. I don't have to drink water. I don't have to think about mental health and mental illness is a complete big issue. And we're not going to talk about that, in a church, but so let's concentrate on physical health for a minute. We will talk about that, but it's like, you see what I mean? I was struck by the fact that even I, as evolved as a person as I think I am, that I probably wasn't doing the best when it comes to being as healthy as I could be. I exercising as much as I could? Was I, like, for me, eating meat with every meal? That's the goal, like, and having to take a good hard look at myself and saying, okay, if you'd have asked me when I was young, I would have said 40 isn't even half my life. So, but what have I done to make sure that I'm getting to 90? And 100, have I been the best steward? We're used to hearing, we are the temple of the Holy Spirit in the context of like sexual sin. So as a consequence of that, don't fornicate, don't have affairs, all that kind of stuff. But when we're not necessarily used to thinking about we are the temple of the Holy Spirit in the context of what do you do to an actual building to keep it up?
Wow.
Because the building requires service, and it requires somebody to make sure that the electrics is working. It requires cleaning. It requires plumbing. Because if you leave it to its own devices, it will become derelict because of the law of entropy. You have to do something active to keep it healthy. Just like with your car, you have to service it to keep it young. And I don't know that this message from a health, that like there are some people who they're health conscious, but it's not necessarily in the Christian space. And I'm very much like, in the same way that I'm becoming aware of the fact that actually dealing with injustice is a very Christian thing to do. Talking about injustice and speaking about race relations is a very Christian thing to do. I'm now on the fence of actually taking care of my body is a very Christian thing to do. And it's not necessarily like how I came up. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I know. I mean, I'm just sort of going crazy inside because all of what you've said, you've kind of fleshed out a really, really good, almost like a theological conundrum or dilemma that we have, because as you've so masterfully explained that, perhaps some of our, as the good that, for instance, faith and expectation that God can grant, the miraculous, it has almost led us into so theologically buying into a sort of let us fix the problem when we get there, as opposed to what can we do to prevent. you know, and that's interestingly that whole, it's a paradigm shift, because even, for instance, this whole concept of preventative medicine, the thinking so much more about what we can do before a crisis,
Yes.
rather than trying to get to a crisis and then figure out what pills do I need to take, or what exercises do I need to do. And so much of our lives related to health and well-being is done from the vantage point of crisis management. And I think that's unfortunately been reinforced in the Christian space, because you know, it's when there's a problem, oh God, you know, deliver me from this situation of a stroke or whatever health problem it is. And God is like, I gave you the tools, I gave you, you know, if you look in the scriptures, if you look in the, and there are sources outside of the scriptures that I do believe all knowledge comes from God ultimately. So, you know, so we can find this information and treat our bodies, like you said, as a temple. I love the analogy of you mentioned servicing and maintenance. You know, you think about your cars or your property, if you don't keep on top of certain things and do certain checks, it seems boring, but actually that's how you make sure that, okay, now I realize that this bolt is loose, we need to tighten this here, because if I don't, I'm going to have a burst pipe down the line that then is going to create this massive problem, and I have to make all this expense, drive all this expenditure here to fix it. So, you know, it's interesting again, because my whole podcast is about, it's called Renovate My Life. So I kind of similarly was talking about trying to kind of look at my whole house, the different rooms and the different, you know, departments of my life, and, you know, kind of look at the leadership room, look at the mental health, physical health, and career and everything, and kind of trying to see what servicing can I do, what kind of refurbishment, or just pulling to reorganizing, because I was just realizing I was just kind of coasting and not being intentional enough about servicing and managing areas, and then, you know, that drift just leads to crisis and things becoming derelict, as you said. So, but I think it sounds to me like an interesting area to do some almost some theological research to kind of explore like the relationship between attitudes Christians develop around prevention, around healthcare, based on their beliefs and faith. I think that could be an interesting area for a doctor / Christian theologian to really explore that interface. So if that's something you're interested in, man, I think you should go for it, because I think it could be a nice little project.
It's difficult. Like you don't want to make sweeping generalizations, because of people that always.
No,
but I think for myself, I was aware, and having spoken to some people, like that's really the space that we were coming from, that it's almost like a complacency, because so the analogy that I heard a long time ago that speaks to your point, that is very useful for me, and I think it's applicable to so many areas of life. There was a gentleman called Barry Smith. He was a lovely itinerant preacher that we invited a number of times. He was from New Zealand, and he talked about, he was a what you call an end time preacher. So his whole thing was talking about end times and a revelation and stuff. And the analogy he had was like, imagine that there's a group of people that they're running towards a cliff, and unfortunately the cliff is very high, and there's rocks at the bottom. What we do as a society with so many things is, rather than putting up a relatively inexpensive fence at the top of the hill, we will invest in very expensive ambulances at the bottom. And when he said that, I was like, there are so many things in life where that analogy works. And even knowing that, like, and being in medicine, that you think, come on, and I have higher blood pressure in my family and stroke in my family, like, you know. So yeah, I think, I mean, there is people say doctors make the worst patients. you know, I try not to be a doctor when I'm not at work, you know. So maybe because, you know, I just think, and I'm grateful that my wife is not a doctor, because, like, what would you talk about all the time? All the time. But, you know, I think so. There there are a number of overlapping things that I think we both share. So I
Yeah.
think there's a big there's some evidence that doctors themselves were not so good at
Yeah.
looking after our own health. Maybe it's because of, with familiarity comes contempt. I'm around disease and illness all the time. So maybe I don't necessarily see the risk of those things in me. Maybe that's what it is. But there's also some evidence that Black people, we don't engage in healthcare in the same way that other groups do. And there's also evidence that Black men, you know, I was very intrigued about what you said about therapy. So like, one of the conversations I've had is a conversation with a therapist. And, you know, I just think I'm at the stage. So I've decided that that's the direction I'm going in. So maybe we'll talk after about who you see. You can recommend somebody to me. But I think, you know, I am now of the opinion that actually, similar to the fact that, you know, there are some people in certain industries where you just get a medical. There's nothing wrong, but you just get a medical every so often. And I think that I'm aware of, you know, this isn't a conversation about like the extremes of mental illness, or even for me, when somebody is mature enough, evolved enough to be able to recognize issues in themselves. I'm becoming of the opinion now that probably everybody should have some therapy once, and try. Like I'm definitely going to do it, and I'll talk about my experiences when I do. But like, if you don't mind, could I ask you, like, what was it for you that thought, this isn't a problem I'm going to be able to solve by myself or with my prayer group or with my pastor, and this is the avenue with which I'm going to solve the problem? What was it for you?
Okay. Yeah. So, yeah. Okay. I'll put it this way. So for me, I've realized that I've had intermittent symptoms for a few years, where I would have episodes where my mood would be quite low, scraping the barrel. I just felt unmotivated, you know, totally. I was kind of overeating at those points, or undereating, depending on whatever was going on. And it would oftentimes not be situationally, you know, dependent. There might not have been a trigger that I could go, oh yes, it's the death of so and so or whatever. There would just be these seasons. Sometimes I wondered if it was seasonal. Sometimes it's kind of, you know, oftentimes happen more or triggered by sort of darker, colder months, but not always. And I would have, I kind of feel like I was going off into a bit of a spiral with you know, with how I was kind of managing things. But I would invariably, I found I was able to get back on track after some time, and I would be invited or kind of directed towards therapy, but never really engaged. And I think that ties back to you know, perhaps perceiving that I'm not that bad, because I almost felt like at times I just wasn't I wasn't at the point where people then started to think, okay, now this is, I almost sort of saw therapy as you go there when that's at the point when you've done it, you've exhausted every other option type of thing. So, so for me, I think this time round, realizing, having spoken to, other people as well, I think it just became clear to me that I had some underlying insecurities, some issues, some tendencies that I think might explain the proclivity to having these sort of episodes of really low mood and high anxiety. And so and then I also knew that some of my experiences of let's just call it sort of racial harm, I think it contributed to some anxieties around around, and especially in this time as well, this sort of time of heightened racial awareness. And so I think it was clear to me that, one, I wanted to talk to a therapist, and I definitely wanted to talk to a Black therapist, a Black man. And I'm sure, yes, you may be aware, and your listeners, if you work as a doctor, I'm sure it's not just a doctor, if you work in the NHS, you can get access to referrals to the practitioner health service, where they basically offer NHS employees access to therapy. So basically through that, sent off my application and was invited to choose an interview. And so I actually chose my first person who did the initial assessment. So we got like a 2-hour slot basically to have a conversation. And it was honestly exactly what I needed. I was able to really have that session just was excellent. It was just absolutely wonderful. And I'm in the process of being organized some CBT. So I'm just waiting to hear back.
So, Dr. Brown, I am proud of you, and I really appreciate your honesty. Because I do think that, so a conversation I'm having with my friends is that, there's this thing about like our parents, we're looking at them and thinking like there's so much that they had to deal with. So taking care of themselves in this kind of space was not something that they allowed themselves the time to. That's for other people. I've got to work, I've got to put food in, I've got to provide for my family. And because of what they've done, our lives are slightly easier than theirs. And as a consequence of that, we potentially have the space to be able to think about it. And we talked about little things, and a phrase keeps coming up. We turned out all right. But like a lot of us are now thinking like, I'm not sure we did. I suppose for me there's a realization of, in the same way that again, a tune up or whatever. I just think that I'm convinced about that being a direction that I want to go. Just to have the like you say, a tune up conversation, take it where it can go. And because have you heard of a lady called Anita Phillips?
I know a number of Anitas. I'm not sure if they're Phillips. In what context?
She's a Christian therapist, preacher, who talks about mental health and faith and the intersection. And and honestly, her YouTube, my God, like it's fire. So I'll send you some stuff afterwards, and I always plug wherever I go. But like I started listening to her stuff, and her view on mental health and mental illness and the intersection between that and faith. For me, it was very timely. And it's interesting because, so George Floyd was killed probably about a week before I had the stroke. And I was aware, like, you hear the names, the Ahmaud Arbery's and the Trayvon Martin. You need to go?
Sorry, it was just my wife. I was just telling her that I just wrapped.
Yeah. So like, we've heard the names, the Ahmaud Arbery's and the Eric Garners and the the Trayvon Martins, and you might get angry for a bit, and then you film it, and then you carry on. You get angry for a bit, but like the more I thought, I don't know why. Like I don't know why in this stage of my life, but the more I thought about it, the angrier I got.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't settle. I couldn't, like I lost sleep over it.
Yeah.
And the response to it, and then the stroke. So to me, I think both things were the reason why I decided to start having these kinds of conversations. Because so first off, the things that became true to me, or like I became convinced of, is that, well, you know, like just like you say, I'm young, I'm slim, I thought I was relatively healthy. So the reaction that most people have had is surprise when they hear about the stroke. And for me, that's good, and it's really heartening, because I'm so happy to hear that as a consequence of that, it helped you start walking down a more healthy road, and that was my aim. The phrase that keeps coming to me is, we need to start taking better care of ourselves.
Yeah.
And so that's on so many different levels. So, you know, like if you look at our traditional African cultures, that's what the phrase, it takes a village to raise a child. We were in each other's lives, we were talking about stuff, we were interacting, you know, and that level of social interactive, I think, is protective, you know, from a emotional health point of view. Having the interactions, you know, we know enough to know that people who isolate themselves are more prone to, you know, the extremes of potential like mental illness and stuff like that. But also, because of the fact that I am aware that, you know, Black people may not engage in healthcare, and I'm a doctor, so maybe I can be a catalyst to start conversations and maybe get people, just even if it's just, auntie, go and check your blood pressure. Bro, go to your GP, check your blood pressure, you know, because we need to be taking better care of ourselves. There's evidence that at everything you measure from an outcome point of view, Black people always fare worse. Now, I'm not saying, so I am pretty convinced about what the reason is, but that's, you know, I'm not here to bash anybody, but on one side, we need to address the systematic problems in healthcare that are causing these glaring inequalities in outcomes. But also, we need to start taking better care of ourselves. You know, so if I can have this conversation as a consequence of that, people's awareness of stuff goes up, then, you know, praise God, because evidently we have been reminded that things are happening in your life and militating actively against us. And for me, it was those two things, the health thing and the social inequality and justice thing, that made me think, nah, I think I don't think this is the first time in my life I've ever been so vocal about stuff. I'm dealing with it every day, but you know, I don't know, maybe because of not wanting to offend previously, or, you know, so it's, you know, as a Black person being a minority in a predominantly white space, I'm aware of the fact that I'm Black a lot of the time. Sometimes you might forget, but not often. No, not often, you know. But I think now I'm very much like, we need to start taking better care of ourselves, because people are dying.
Yeah.
So that was my motivation for going down the road.
Yeah. No, I'm pleased to hear. I'm really pleased to hear you explain what you think might have been the catalyst. I mean, interestingly, both the catalyst for you to start talking more openly about racial inequalities, you know, structural racism, as well as the impact that has on health outcomes, but also the impact of our personal lifestyle choices. But, you know, interestingly, that what happened to you personally and what happened to George Floyd kind of almost coming together seemed to kind of created this effect. And, you know, and I think now that we know this, and we've had this epiphany, we've had this awakening, and I think I'm absolutely sure of it, that we're not the only ones. So many more people are opening up about the conversations around race. But interestingly, what's helping, so for you it was a stroke, but also the outcomes of COVID-19, the
Yeah.
disproportionate impact it's been having on Black and other minority ethnic groups. It's just making people go, well, okay, we're aware that we have disproportionate access to medical care in some instances. There's the poverty and socioeconomic access in terms of cost for prescriptions and things that can explain some of the outcomes. But hang on a minute here. What's going on? COVID-19. Why is it that we seem to have these greater outcomes? And there are lots of different theories in terms of whether we're working in places where we have greater exposure, all of this. But at the end of the day, if comorbidities have anything to do with it, then what can we do? What power do we have to make certain changes that can lower our risk to morbidities in the first place? And that's why it is absolutely crucial, essential, and it's so necessary for us to say we are going to do what we can in our power. So for me, what that looks like has been, as I said, just exercise has gone from something that I saw as this horrible chore to avoid to something that I actually really enjoy, and I'm doing on a very every single day, getting in my exercise, diet wise, looking at what I'm eating and actually thinking, okay, this idea of calorie counting or trying to even measure what I'm eating just felt like the most ridiculous thing to do. But now it's a case of, I understand that food is primarily fuel. You just like how you don't just ram anything into a car. If you've got a diesel car, you got to put diesel in there. You can't just put in petrol, or you can't just put in kerosene. And you put in a certain amount that is, based on where you want to go. It's not, it's not about just overindulgence. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't enjoy, different things, but it's the way I think about food is just so different now, and this is literally only in a case of a reckoning that's happened within the last kind of couple of months, just waking up. And as I said, it's interesting for me is this is despite the fact that I'm a doctor and I give patients advice around health as part of my job. But interestingly, it still goes back to what you said about the way that we often still think about crisis management, because oftentimes a patient comes to you when they've already got a problem. So we're quite good at, and I can imagine, especially in A&E, you tend to fix urgent problems that often, if we're being honest, it's the patient who's not been taking not been doing the right things regarding their management of their diabetes and comes in the DKA or comes in. Do you know what I mean? So you're dealing with people with probably underlying chronic illnesses that are not really being managed very well. Absolutely. And then they present in a crisis. So, but I think crisis management is kind of the model of so much of even the way we practice medicine as well. So it's not surprising that many doctors will probably translate that approach into their own personal lives. I'll be all right. I'll just, and then we don't do enough of the preventative stuff. So I'm a new man when it comes to that, and I hope that our conversation will inspire others to just make the difference. And I'm not going to carry the current weight I'm carrying and putting this unnecessary strain on my heart. So that's where I'm at.
So I mean, what was I going to say? So one of the conversations I'm going to find somebody who's into lifestyle medicine and really like drill into that. I think just like you're saying, I've had a conversation with a Christian cardiologist, and one of the phrases he was like doctors don't cure people. By the time you come to us, a lot of the damage has been done, and again, it's a case of reducing the next stroke or the next heart attack and stuff like that. So I want to have a conversation with a lifestyle medicine person, because we're starting to see those kinds of signals on TV and stuff, and there's lots of stuff in public health. And again, I'm probably more sensitive to it because I'm in the health arena. So when you see like the apps to count your sugars and all that kind of stuff, I'm like, even I've seen it, I'm like, I'm not engaging, but I'm aware that these things are out there. So I do want to have a conversation with somebody who that is the way that they practice medicine.
One second, my wife